Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. It's an aviation podcast, all things aviation in midlife, whatever, however you define that. We're not here to teach or analyze. We're here to have open discussions about all of our adventures and learning opportunities and share it amongst the community. Excuse me, I'm Ben, sometimes referred to as the Sage, but never by my children. I'm an instrument-rated pilot here in the Atlanta area. Started flying when I was 48 and fly 182, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mr. Brian Siskin.
Hello, Ben.
Brian, good to see you. And also our co-host and producer, Ted, also known as FlySport.
Hey there. Yeah, so we've got Ben in Atlanta, we've got Brian in Nashville, and I'm over here in Portland.
Yeah, I probably should have told everybody where y'all live.
Timestamp Tedder. It's not timestamp Tedder, it's FlySport? Or is it
it's whatever. FlySport is what the YouTube channel is when I didn't want to use my name. And then timestamp is my midlife moniker, which I was just using before the show even.
Yeah. So, well, Ben, thanks for the intro. And, I gotta say, you got big shoes to fill. Obviously we're going to miss Chris around here. But I think that we'll be bringing something a little bit different. It'll be a different mix. And, everybody should just be patient with us as we kind of kick through. We do have a lot of new things that we're bringing forward. So with all new things comes some fumbling and some stumbling.
Yes. Yeah, it does. Do want to cover a few housekeeping things. This is a live show, so we encourage our audience that's listening to the live broadcast to speak up in the chat. We are reading your comments. This is coming out whichever platform you listen to us on, iTunes, Spotify, wherever there are. Leave us a 5-star review. We do read them. We pay very close attention to them. Definitely subscribe. We want to grow the community as much as possible. So with that, who's been fun? Because it sure as heck hasn't been me.
Well, I've gotten probably more hours in this month than I probably ever have. So I'll have to say that it's probably been me. Ben, you were saying earlier that Chris, the OG host of this podcast, was just not able to even have time to really fly. And then maybe there's a host curse or something, because now you haven't had time to fly because of some things going on with your planes. So I'm just running wild, I'm going while the getting's good. So yeah, I did a long trip to Marfa, Texas and back. I also have been to Missouri and all over the place. I've just been flying a lot, and it's been, there's something about when you get, when you get about 100 hours in a particular specific plane, not even sort of make model, but the exact same plane. Once you get to about 100 hours, which I'm approaching now, or right at about that, and my plane that I have a fractional ownership with or whatever, I don't know. It starts to feel like it's just an extension of my body a little bit. Like I'm starting to get, really unconscious with it in a good way. So this last month has been huge. I've been doing a lot of flying, but I think that it has really cemented a lot of things. And then lastly, I did do my BFR the other day, and that was wild. And I asked to get pushed, and I got pushed. So yeah, man. And,
anything specific on that in the BFR that you learned or messed up in?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the key things were that I definitely did some impossible turns. I definitely did, power off from upwind, crosswind, a lot of different sort of awkward places in the pattern. Those are things that I certainly will not do without an instructor.
Absolutely.
And so that was just a really good experience. I think one of the most shocking things for me was realizing on the impossible turn, I did one from 800 AGL, and it's one thing to just go, okay, I'm getting the nose down, I'm turning, and I'm, getting best glide worked out, trimmed out. But really, it's not that. Like you've got to get around and start getting down, and so then I'm also
trying to keep it at a standard rate turn so you don't stall the banking too hard. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot more to it than just that.
And then you end up with a really sharp nose down attitude because you don't want to run out of runway. And then the next thing you know, you're going 95 knots. And then you're trying to figure out how to, and so then I'm slipping and I'm trying to and you don't think about how there's extra turns in this, to sort of S-turn your way into.
It's not a 180 that you're doing, right? Like it's easy to think, well, I'm just doing a 180 and coming back down. It's like, well, that's fine if the runway is half a mile away, but
and to my left. Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming down, and then, when you're hovering down and you're trying to get the plane slowed down, you see the runway running out and you're going across the runway and then off the other side and then kind of bring it back. You're just trying to do anything you can to slow everything down. I mean, I got them all down. I landed everything. It felt really good. She said I did a good job, I guess, or whatever. But, I haven't done a lot of, landing in the last 1,000 feet of a runway kind of thing, right. And especially after having done all that. So there was that. Also did a lot of drills, experiments to really see, okay, here's where the glide ring is right at the edge of the runway on this particular airport. Now let's see if we can get there kind of stuff. And then also doing a lot of 360s at various bank angles to see exactly how much altitude that plane generally loses in a 360-degree turn. So when you're doing a spiral descent to get down to an emergency descent location, you have choices to make between, I did it at like 40 degree. We did it at 40 and did it at 10 and sort of compared the results and all that. And depending on the situation and how, you don't want to get too far if you're doing just 10, but sometimes 40 is too much. The distances or the level of descent was about the same. So I found that curious and interesting.
Yeah.
So,
but that's something that you have to build up a feel for. And that's why I thought it was valuable.
Yeah. So we did a lot of engine out this, engine out that, all kinds of, sloped, landing tailwind on sloped runways, power off, just all kinds of,
yeah.
And she really stacked a lot of scenarios. She was, when I did my simulated instrument time, it was like, okay, well now you're picking up ice. Okay, well now you're in IMC. Now this is how, by the way, side note, I know I'm going a long time about this, but it was really interesting. The BFR was, but the best part of the BFR was when I'm in simulated instrument, foggles or whatever. And then she tells me, okay, now you've gone into IMC and now you've noticed that you're starting to pick up ice. What are you going to do? And I just went up to my autopilot and pressed the button that automatically turns, like it does a standard rate 180. The Trio Pro Pilot autopilot is what I have, and you just press the button and it will do the whole turn for you and start taking you back. And she made me stop. She's like, okay, no, it's closed up behind you now.
You're like, that's not fair.
Changing the game as you go along.
But I was using all my tools until she took them away from me. But yeah, so there was just a lot of, stacking the deck against me in every which way, and a lot of engine out stuff. So it was extremely valuable, and I had a great time. Yeah, it felt
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of things that you wouldn't want to do alone anyway. It's where it's like, take advantage of that experience and the experienced person next to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What about you, Ted? You've been flying at all?
Yeah. So I have like 170 hours on the egg in the last, 5 months. And what I haven't done is had a CFI in the plane with me. And for a few reasons, but finally I got my CFI Sam in the schedule and we flew together on Sunday.
Northwest Aeronaut Sam.
Northwest Aeronaut, yep. And that
momentous occasion.
Yes. So, I've really been struggling with my landings and just been saying, they're just not great. And I couldn't figure it out. And, I kept thinking, well, I need to get slower. Sam got in the plane and the first landing we went and did, he's like, you're going way too slow. And it's like, I didn't think you could land too slow. Like usually the problem, especially in an LSA, is coming in with too much speed. So I'm sitting here trying to fight to get 5 to 10 under what it should be. And the real problem isn't what you think. The problem is that it just floats. So you're getting like a 200 feet per minute descent as you're coming in on final. And you're like, I need to get down. And you try to slow it down even more. So by the time you get to the runway, you have the nose up too far and you've also run out of airspeed. So, it's really hard to time that exactly, time that those last few feet and, not stall out with 3 feet remaining. So
what you're saying is 175 hours in the egg and you've learned how to land.
Yes.
Nice.
I'm maybe a slow learner, but yes.
So it really came down to just speed. I mean, it was just because things are just getting too mushy.
Yeah. Just going too slow and then spending too much time trying to round it out, just drive it onto the runway basically. And, it was just like, wow, like I've spent so much time on my own trying to figure that out. And, it's one of those reminders of why you do, BFRs. This wasn't a BFR, but I told him, I said, look, I just want to do kind of this like progressive BFR. It's like, we're going to fly together every few months and, that just adds up, not a single thing. And, so it was good to get him in the plane and, kind of figure that out.
How much instruction had you had in that plane before?
I had about 5 hours when I was renting it. Before I bought this one, and then the rest of it's been on my own. And so, that's part of the problem, right? Like,
so there's a lot of people in here that don't even have 170 hours total, right? And I remember very recently when I was under that amount of hours, and it just goes to show that there's, I don't know. I think a lot of people get their certificate and they just kind of go. I think it's important to keep coming back and figuring out what your weaknesses are and not have it be because you have to, because of BFR,
yes,
or whatever, but just, and not to do even things like me, like where I'm thinking I'm not going to do a bunch of impossible turns by myself. So of course that would be with an instructor, but to do things that, to even do pattern work or whatever with an instructor, it can set off all kinds of lights.
I'll chime in. I've got over 900 hours and I went up with an instructor to start the commercial and we were just doing some basic maneuvers, nothing on the commercial side of it. But so in a 182 for the other younger pilots out there, so to speak, we have manifold pressure and RPM because we have a constant speed prop. Well, this other instructor got me using my RPM gauge in the pattern instead of using my manifold pressure. And that made a huge difference. And I'd flown the plane 900 hours before I started learning that. I was doing everything off manifold pressure. So I don't think it matters how many hours you have. There's always something to learn from it. But
yeah, and breaking habits is big. Yeah.
Well, let's move forward a little bit.
Hang on, before we do, that is such a great comment here. We have to highlight that one. Ben, you want to read this for us?
Oh yeah, from Biff Benson. As long as the instructor didn't preface that with, "To make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs."
My poor egg. Yes. My poor little plane.
It's already been cracked once with the windshield. So
yeah. For those that don't know what Ted's flying, just Google CTLS flight design.
Yep.
Egg.
That's all it takes. Yep. Yeah. Egg. Yeah.
And you'll see what plastic egg looks like.
Yes.
Well, let's move forward if everybody's good with that.
Yeah.
Brian, we had talked about this earlier, and it's kind of on that same training topic. Not within our tight group. I know there's a lot of listeners that may be living in high density altitude airports.
Yeah.
But if you've never done it, which I'm one of those people, I was very curious to hear about your experience out in Marfa.
Yeah.
You had some pretty high density altitude.
Yeah. And I just find it, I find it interesting that it's something that everybody studies, everybody's made aware of. If anything, it's kind of this, I don't know, there's some sort of mysterious quality to it. It's sort of this kind of, I don't know, it borders on, like what a ground loop is for tail wheel or something, it's this, that's the one thing that'll really get you, which is 100% true. But it was great to have an experience where I definitely kind of, went right into it, and I had some good guidance. And so I thought I'd share, some of that, and maybe it'll, I don't know, encourage some people to, I don't know, with their CFI, or, we're not instructors here, but, I can just tell you, here's some of the CFI level advice that I got, and here's what my experience was. But basically, I was flying into Marfa, Texas, a week and a half ago. And the airport is KMRF, if anybody's interested in looking it up. So it's at 4,000 or 5,000 feet already. It's high desert there. And, on the way in, I came from San Angelo, Texas, and it was already pretty high density altitude. There was, over 100 degrees. I was doing this in the afternoon, probably at the worst time. But I'll tell you, the first observation that I had was how I'd been paying attention to what the density altitude was at different times of day ahead of time in the places where I was going to be going. And the first thing I was struck by was how, yes, it is better in the morning when it's a little or a lot cooler. It's better, but it's not to the proportion of better that you would ever expect it to be. So that was my first observation. You would think if it's 35 degrees cooler in the morning, then there'd be some, by percentage, the density altitude would be that much less. And it's just not the case. So that's the first thing. That doesn't mean it was
so basically, great. Yeah, it goes from bad to worse. Like,
right. Yeah.
It's never going to be zero. It's always going to be, this isn't true, but it's basically always going to be 5,000. And that's as good as it gets.
Right. So when I was coming in, gosh, I should have probably made some video clips. I'm going to be releasing a whole thing about it, this whole experience I had. But when I was coming in, I have my 4-flight set to, you can set the little pieces, little bars at the bottom to be customized to be whatever it is you want. And one of those that I have is just AGL. What am I above the ground right now? And so I was coming in at 10,500 feet, and then just watching that ground come up and come up and come up and come up, so I knew that I was getting closer. And then you kind of come through this sort of broad pass, and, it was pretty bumpy. I was getting kicked around enough to where the autopilot was kind of, not really able to handle it. So it was super bumpy. I was hot. I was, wearing it's already, even with that altitude, it was just so hot. I had like a sweat towel around my neck. So I was like at the gym, like sort of doing this thing. And, anyway, so I come in and the advice that I got, that I'm going to put up on the screen here. I'm not going to say who gave me this advice, but, I will say that they are, a widely known aviation YouTube CFI. And he was gracious enough to tell me this, and I'm going to read it, because this is actually sanctioned instructional advice that I received personally that was hugely helpful in my encountering density altitude. So he said, morning will give you the best DA, but especially with how lightish you'll be, afternoon will be fine. So that was encouraging right away. I told him that, that I was not going to be loaded down. Anyway, higher density altitude will yield a higher true airspeed at the same indicated airspeed than a lower density altitude will. You should still fly the same indicated airspeeds you are used to when taking off and landing under normal conditions. You may feel like you're going faster on takeoff or landing because you are. With the thinner air, it takes a higher volume of air over the wings and prop blades to produce the same amount of pressure, hence a higher true airspeed. A common mistake people make when flying into a high density altitude airport is they'll carry extra speed on final just because of the quote unquote thin air. Don't do this. Just fly your normal indicated airspeeds. If you intentionally fly faster, you're adding insult to injury by adding on to your already higher true airspeed, and you're going to run out of runway quickly. The only thing you should add a few knots would be for gusty. The only thing you should add a few knots for would be gusty winds, or perhaps if you're super heavy, most manufacturers recommend a slight increase in approach speed. Enjoy the beautiful flight. So, a couple of people I got pointers from about that specific location and just density altitude in general. And so when I was coming in, first of all, the terrain is hard to understand there, but it's when you're looking down, you're used to just looking at things at scale. So you're used to looking at buildings or forests or parks or streets, or I don't know, you have something to gauge how high you are. But when you get up into that place, it gets hard. When you look down, you can't tell if you're 100 feet off the ground or 7,000 feet off the ground. It's because of just the way that things look.
All right, you're saying that because it's sparse.
There's nothing out there. I mean, yeah,
but there's no. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so like I flew probably, I guess it was maybe an hour and a half or so from San Angelo. Between San Angelo and Marfa, there's nothing. There's a couple of little tiny little towns that you pass, but I mean, there is absolutely nothing. So it just, you go through an hour and a half of just nothing. You start to lose perspective about how big things are, how vast things are, and it's all just like sort of moonscape. So anyway, I'm coming into to land, and I found myself very high. I slipped it pretty hard. Did everything I can to kind of get down and lose some speed and all that. I was just playing everything way safe. I wanted to be way high, and there's it's a huge space, even though it's sort of inside it's sort of like a plateau inside this ring of mountains. So I just, there's nothing else around. So, slipped it down for probably 2,500 feet, and then kind of got, set up. I was comfortable with everything. But like I said, as I got closer and got closer, I could already tell that everything was going a lot faster. I actually kept saying out loud to myself, fly your indicated airspeed, fly your indicated airspeed. The density altitude was it was probably pushing 9,000. And it was, definitely 100 degrees outside, and it was definitely the afternoon in the desert, and at an altitude airport. So it's
a different sight picture really coming in, like going from a 50-foot wide runway to a 200-foot wide runway. It's just a completely different sight picture, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything was just alien. Right. And so, I got it. I just aimed and got down there, and everything was looking good, and I was on my numbers. But boy, it was, I was trying to explain to somebody that's not a pilot, but I was like, it's like if one day you were driving to work and you were trying to go 70 on the highway, but for whatever reason, to maintain 70 on the highway that day, the car actually had to go 120. So just everything was, you're seeing everything going by really fast. But your indicated speed is what it normally is. So that's what it was about. And then, I came in, and I forgot to mention also, it was super gusty, winds, and like a really wild crosswind, and, all this. And I was coming in definitely wing dipped, and, trying to get it on one wheel at I was telling somebody the other day that it basically was like coming into an airport and land. I come over the numbers at I try to come over the numbers like 66 knots is kind of my number. It felt like I was coming over the numbers at 90 knots, and then here I am sort of trying to land on one wheel, and I had judged it right, but I touched that wheel, and then it kind of sent me up. It wasn't a massive, like, hard bounce. It was just like a gentle, it was almost like I was weightless, it was just sort of touched the right wheel, and then, okay. Then the plane kind of righted itself, and then it kind of set down. So everything was fine.
Did it feel wildly fast?
Yes. Yeah. I felt wildly fast.
Sounds like you're describing a air show pilot.
Right.
And I mean, like, that's a lot going on. I don't have any experiences doing that. So I'm vastly interested in this. I've got a trip coming up that I'm hoping to be able to take in my plane that it's not going to be quite that high, but it's going to be higher than I'm used to. So this is, I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people.
So I guess if anything, it's just what I got from it is just don't, seek good advice and follow that advice, fly your indicated airspeed and expect your senses to tell you things that are different and you'll be fine. It's not a big deal. I'm just got to, do your calculations and all that and consult the CFI. We are not instructors.
I think if you're a newer pilot, you just get into a mode of this is going to be different and head's going to be on a swivel. I need to be on my A game. Yeah. And it's just the whole, your whole attitude towards doing something like this.
In Brian's case, I think that the most beautiful advice is, fly your numbers.
Yep.
Like, everything else is different. Fly your numbers.
Yep.
And, I would not want to be at a high elevation, shorter runway. Thankfully, as you go higher, generally the runways are larger, but if you're doing some adventurous stuff, they're not necessarily. And that, I think, is where you're really getting in trouble. You're like, well, I take off at 2,500 feet at home. So what if I'm at 4,000 feet and it's still 2,500 feet long? Well, that's your problem.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Brian. It was helpful for me. I'm sure it's going to be helpful for a lot of folks.
I appreciate you appreciating it.
Looking at the chat real quick, any tips for staying focused on really long cross country flights from Jeremy Wittenberg? I do a fair amount. A lot of my time has been built up doing cross country flights, usually 2 to 3 hours. And, I try to play the game of where am I going to land when I lose my engine? That's a good distraction and also very helpful. What about you guys?
For me, it's, what frequency am I going to get next?
Yes.
And also, what is the dumb thing that I'm overlooking about my flight plan? Because there's a lot of times where, like even today, like I was flying back from Missouri and it was, nothing crazy, like 140-mile flight, but I had, kind of direct toed it for the most part. And I realized that if I just, altered my course by about 5 degrees, it would actually get me in a more comfortable gliding position with some of these airports along the way. It was a subtle change. Like when I was looking at the flight plan, right, it seemed like it was fine. So I always reevaluate my flight plan based on the conditions and what's happening. And that's always a time thing. And then also buttonology, it's taking time to go through more cryptic menus or things to figure out what things are, while trying not to screw things up.
Dad, you've done a lot of long hauls.
So and I've been doing some 6-hour legs and, over areas where you're not looking for traffic, right? Like you're still IFR following roads. Sorry, I follow roads. I'm a sport pilot. I'm not literally IFR. So, try to keep with your glide ring somewhere where you can crash where there's people, but there's not a lot else to do. And so as long as I, remember to check my fuel, remember to check my gauges every once in a while, on this most recent flight, I finally started putting some music on the background. It's the first time I've experimented with that. And there's still enough radio calls that you're not hearing the music all the time. But, I was getting bored enough that I was really helpful.
You've got on the screen there from Todd Stauffer. I get a kick out of listening to ATC and other pilots and imagining where they are in the airspace. To that point, I do that, but for a different purpose. I like to build a mental picture of where everybody is, especially when I get close to my destination. I'm listening to air traffic route, other planes approach controller routing other jets and what have you, trying to figure out what my sequence is going to be. And that takes up that. And again, that's toward the end of the trip. But I think it's a really good practice.
Yeah, especially when you're going from center land to, kind of getting close to a class airspace. And you're like, oh, okay, I know they were in front of me and they got handed off to a 1260. So that's probably what's next. It's not the center thing where you're, an hour in between all of that. It's, and kind of predicting that timing of when it's going to be.
Yeah. And it's kind of a good segue into our main topic.
Yeah, let's do that.
Keep flying fun. How to prevent burnout. And I imagine there's some student pilots out there listening and can't imagine being burned out. It's a real thing. People can get into a habit of just doing the same thing over and over and then lose their interest with it. And that's kind of why I thought of bringing this topic up. And let me interrupt you. I think this is really a midlife thing, right? Yeah.
Because you're not working on hours. You're not doing CFI, being a CFI to get your hours. We're sitting here. What do we want to do? You've got a plane or you're renting. It doesn't matter. What's the goal here?
Yeah.
And, you get rolls thrown at you because you went to the restaurant. Great. What else are you doing?
My Airbus friend, pilot friend, he said what you do is recreational gas burning.
Yeah. Okay. So
he's not wrong. But, there are things you can do to keep things fresh. And that's really kind of what it is doing the same thing over and over is just going to burn you out. Some of the things that I've done in my past and still do to this day, angel flight, volunteering, trying to give back a little bit. Most of the angel flight organizations require that you have an instrument rating. So if you don't have that, you can go and volunteer for Pilots and Paws and help our four-legged friends out. There's a lot of different organizations out there where you can have an opportunity to give back. You also have, I set goals. I want to do a long cross country being over 300 nautical miles. I want to do one once a quarter just to go somewhere different.
Yep.
I mean, there are other things. What are y'all doing?
Well, yeah, for me, it's going to places where the terrain and the surroundings are unfamiliar or as unfamiliar as possible or as unlike where I typically locally fly as humanly possible, and always trying to find a way to have an extra challenge in it, whether it's, tricky airspace or flying over mountains or density altitude or, just whatever it can possibly be that is just pushing the bounds of what I'm comfortable with. I think when people say I'm bored, I don't care what facet of life we're talking about, aviation or anything else. I have no idea what it's like to be bored. I've never been bored one microsecond in my entire life. And to me, when people say like I'm bored or this is boring, I can't even wrap my head around it. It's insanity to me. So even the most mundane things to me in aviation, I think first what I would say is, are you really soaking up the absolute awe-inspiring magic of what you're doing, even if you're just going to your local airport and doing pattern work or whatever? Are you, what else can you do to wrench more out of the experience that you're actually having would be my first thing. And then other than that, I would say, find ways to continue to build and challenge. And it doesn't have to be expensive ratings or, pursuits that are maybe beyond your capacity at the time or whatever. We don't, we never have to fly. We don't have to do anything. Everything's a choice.
So to your point though, and I guess what happened with me, I've said it before, I cover a large geographic territory with my job, and a lot of my time was flying to the same cities over and over. And the plane became a utility. It's not a mode of fun, but I need to be in Savannah for a day and need to get back home, and I can do that. That's not a problem. And it became more of a mode of transportation than it was something to do that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get away from that. And I get away from it. But I found myself going, well, great. I mean, it's going to be great to be able to take the plane to do these things. But that's all it was, is I'm going to go to a business meeting, get in the plane and come back home.
Yeah.
So did you find when you were doing that you didn't practice maneuvers, for instance? Because if all you're using the plane for is cross country, you're never really setting up and, you know.
You're absolutely right. And once I got my instrument rating, there was nothing, you know, you're flying a straight line, you're flying an approach, you're doing it. Flying approaches is awesome. And I wouldn't trade. I still love doing that. I look for weather that I can go shoot approaches in. But my point is it's now become a mode of transportation as opposed to an object to go try out a new restaurant in another state or A, B, C, or D, whatever it may be. And it's easy to get into that rut if you have those tools.
Yeah.
So,
I've found a couple of things. I mean, first of all, obviously, buying a plane unlocks a lot of things that you can do, like overnight trips or whatever else. And, you know, we can kind of set that aside because that's a little specific. But I find, you know, it's always fun to take somebody new flying. And I usually find if I'm doing that and they back out, that's when I'll go do my practice work, right? The window geek, go through your private pilot maneuvers. And, you know, so it's like, well, I have 2 hours. I was planning on being in the plane local anyway. Let me go up and, you know, practice my stalls, practice my 360s, you know, all that type of stuff. So those, you know, that's kind of two examples of that. I've also enjoyed going out camping with the plane. But kind of the thing that really has gotten my interest is the state passport programs. There's definitely one in Wisconsin. There's definitely one in Washington. There's a less great one in Oregon. But I'm doing the Washington one. And it's like, it's just an excuse to go to an airport. It's like, well, I'm going over this way anyway. Let me just go to a new airport. Let me actually stop so you can, you know, shut down the plane and go stamp your passport. Like actually getting out of the plane instead of just, you know, doing a touch and go at a new airport. And so that's been kind of a fun excuse to go try things and, you know, go to airports.
I've set a goal early on to hit there's 104 public use airports in the state of Georgia. And right now I'm at 58. And
well,
that's part of it.
Let me throw sort of a equal and opposite force into this.
Okay.
I think there's also a side of this where people need to realize that it's also fine to put it down. It's also fine to put it down for a while. It's, one of my friends who's in our Discord community, she's been working on her PPL for a while. And then she got to the point where she soloed in March. And then it just got to where she was just spun out. And there's just too many other things happening in life. And she put it down. And then she kind of, I suspect, maybe beat herself up about it a little bit. And then kind of had to get away from it even further, to then make room to come back to it. And she's done it, and she's almost there, almost done. But her confidence level has, drastically improved. Sometimes the best practice or the best thing you can do in any craft is to stop doing it. I have found this to be true in music or in other areas of life. Sometimes you just gotta just put something down for a minute, and actually, when you come back to it, the yield of that time away can be huge. So I just wanted to sort of show the opposite side of that.
I agree with it.
Yeah, like printing.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah,
as you said, nobody's forcing us to fly.
Yeah.
sometimes when your plane's down for 2 months, you don't have a choice.
Right. Yeah.
But no, I absolutely agree with you. But in the spirit of some of the audience who are getting to that 200, 300 hour mark, and maybe Todd Stauffer mentioned seeking new ratings, which that is the absolute number one way, in my opinion, to keep it fresh and also build new skills. But I do see what your point is, Brian.
Yeah.
Well, Aero Grizzly went from his place north of LA to in the San Diego area for a concert. And, it's an example where you wouldn't, are you really going to drive 3 or 4 hours for the concert? Maybe, probably not, but now you have an excuse. You can go fly with a friend and go down there. It's great.
Ted, do you want to explain the passport programs?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I saw 50 by 60's comment there, which, by the way, his name is because he wants to visit all 50 states by plane before he turns 60. So
nice.
Very cool.
It's speaking of passports. Yeah, no, it's more. So the National Parks Program has a passport thing where you go to, Yellowstone and you get a stamp and you put it in your little booklet and that type of thing. It's that sort of thing. It's a little booklet. It looks like a passport. And you go to each of the airports in Washington State. They usually have a green mailbox, and you open the green mailbox and, let's see, it's, I wish I could remember the name of that group. There's always a bunch of stickers in it, but there's a stamp in there, and the stamp is specific for the airport. And so you stamp it in your book and you write the date in your book on, what day you visited. There's no timeline on it. You can visit those 97 airports, 104 airports, whatever, over a year, over 10 years, doesn't matter. And, once you get to 90% of the airports, you get a windbreaker or something, and that's not really the point. Oregon has a program that's like you visit most of them within the same year, you pay a little bit of money and you enter for a raffle for it. And that's just not as
a raffle for a windbreaker.
Yeah. It's a raffle for like $2,000 or something. It's just not, it's just not as well formed. But the Washington one is really well formed. It's all on a map.
Does the windbreaker have snaps or is it zip up?
I think it's actually a leather jacket, but don't quote me on that. It's okay. It's a flight jacket.
We've gone up a level really quickly from a windbreaker.
So,
but to the point, there's an airport near McRae, Georgia, and there's a state park that has this really big, like 36 holes of golf, and it's known throughout the state. And there's an airport that's about a half a mile from the golf course. And it kind of reminds me of Ocracoke. It's just a piece of asphalt that's 4,000 feet long. And there's a phone booth that's just a hotline to the golf course. You just pick it up and get me. And there's no porta potty. There's no nothing there. But that's part of the fun, though. Yeah, just check out these places.
So, hey, I wanted to remind people that if you can do the liking and sharing thing, we're just getting this thing started on a brand new YouTube channel. And so if you can share it into Facebook groups or wherever and help us out, that'd be awesome. But in the meantime, right where you are now, if you just press the buttons that say thumbs up type things, that helps us. I just wanted to say that before I forgot.
Thank you.
And then
I think it's time to bring in our guest.
Well, no, before we bring in the guest, maybe we should introduce our segment because we're going to be needing input from everybody for this the future. This is going to be a recurring theme as much as we have content to support it.
And this topic, we have a channel in the Discord for it. If you're not in the Discord, you can email us at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com and we'll get it that way too.
We'll get you an invitation. So the next segment is going to be called Bag of Words. Ted, do you want to explain to us what Bag of Words is?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But let's bring in our guest here, Josh.
That was smooth. I like that, Ted. That was really good.
I'm not doing this.
Deflect.
Yeah.
Welcome,
hey, Josh. You're muted. Yeah.
Host.
There you go.
There we
okay,
are.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you for highlighting my incompetences with this lovely segment on the podcast.
It's not incompetent. We all do it.
Yes.
I don't care if you've got 20,000 hours or.
My only objection is that the way that Josh originally coined this, it was him saying, I just reached into my bag of words, and it was bag o words. Now our little label here says bag of words, and that just feels more deliberate than this really should be.
I think maybe our producer can fix that.
Yeah, bag o words, bag o words.
How about bag o words?
Keeping it true to Josh's invention, but yeah, Josh. so Josh, tell us maybe a little bit about yourself, and then tell us what's wrong with you.
So I am a late 40s private pilot. I just started a couple years ago, and I fly a Cirrus SR-22, which I've had for about a year and a half, and am just enjoying flying my family around the eastern half of the U.S. And yeah, I got my instrument rating about almost exactly a year ago now.
You fly IFR. You put a lot of hours on your plane, or for midlifers.
Yeah, I try to.
Yeah.
So it's fun. I'm just loving it. I mean, 3 years ago, I'd have no idea that I'd be doing this, and now you fast forward to now, and it's just amazing the freedom and the fun that we get to have. So.
Well, actually, before we get into the bag of words bit, I wanted to ask you real quick, what are your quick thoughts on the burnout topic? Since you've been doing so much flying, I feel like you would have a particular insight on that before we get to the bag of words.
I think for me, it's a mix of, there have been times when, life's intervened and I've gone a month or two without flying. And I think that's okay. I think that's healthy. And just, I think the variety is really what makes it work. I've been doing, probably 2 to 4 times a month, 3-hour flights back and forth, from between Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. I need to just get up and do a VFR flight down to Newport or something like that. We went up to Portland, Maine a couple weeks ago and just had a blast. Just doing little fun trips to remind us, why we have this plane and why we're doing this. And also getting us, I think it's important to get a CFI with you, like every, I do it every 6 months. I go up with CFI.
Yeah.
And because, I don't realize when I'm developing bad habits.
Yeah.
And having that kind of knock off some of the rust you didn't know was developing in parts of your flying proficiency is really important. And also there's a real fun internal sense of like, when I land at an airport and I realize I didn't screw anything up majorly this time. It's like, it took a long time before I was feeling, early on, the first, few hundred hours, like every flight, there's like, okay, let's review the litany of things that I scratched down on my notebook that was like, I should have done this better. I should have done that better. And now it's like, when I look at that list, it's like little things. And like, that makes me proud. And I think that pride is part of the joy of flying.
And some of us have a bar even lower. I got the plane back and I didn't bend anything, and they can use it again. And
there was no FOD on the runway. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So beg words.
Yeah.
What is this?
So last year I was flying down to John Toon in Nashville, Brian, for your Nobody Cares Flying, which was an amazing weekend. I happened to be ferrying Chris down there, the midlife pilot, and because of that, this was immortalized forever on YouTube, to my horror. But we were coming in. If you don't know John Toon, they just have a fairly new control tower, but they don't have radar there. So I could see on ADSB, there's a plane ahead of us that they clear to land, and we're number 2. And it's pretty clear that we're catching up to them. I think they were a Skyhawk, and my Cirrus, I was trying to fly it as slow as I could, but we were catching up.
What's your kind of pattern speed, and then what's your final speed?
Yeah, in the pattern, I'm typically about 110 knots, and then I'm getting down to 90 on base. And then on final, it's 80-ish, and I'm touching down at 70 or so.
Yeah. So I'm, 80 to 90 in the pattern. And then on final, I'm 60, So, when I get a Cirrus behind me, I know like they better not be close because they're going to eat me. So,
yeah. And so I can see, we can see this is going to be a little bit of a conflict, and I don't know, something with Chris sitting next to me, and I think it was one of the first times I'd actually had a friend and not like a family member in the plane.
Another pilot.
Yeah, and someone who's another pilot, and someone who's filming, and I know that he wants to make a video out of this flight. So there's some pressure.
It's a new airport too, right? You hadn't been there yet?
Yeah, I haven't been to the airport. So it's like, you can see, in retrospect, it's easy to see these levels of pressure that are on. But I decide we need to do something, and I'd like to do a 360. But I need to request this from the tower. So I push the talk button, and out of my mouth comes this horrible mess of words, right?
All right. Let's go to that now. Yeah.
Delta Mike, we'd like to change to first spacing. Can you give us a vector?
It's like I had the vocabulary at hand, but I just didn't have it. It was all mixed up and chopped up. So
can you play it again? Sorry, can you do it one more time?
Yeah.
Delta Mike, we'd like to change to first spacing. Can you give us a vector?
I was searching for a direct object to that sentence, which I then just omitted.
Yeah.
But
what's amazing is Tower replied to you, like somehow they read your mind on that.
Yes. So Tower replied. Tower did not laugh. This is important. It's like they let me keep my dignity. They did not laugh, and they said, do a right 360, and which is what I wanted to do anyway. So we immediately went into a 360, and it all worked out fine. But
we'd like to change. That's my favorite part. It's just like I would like a different set of circumstances than that of which I am facing at this moment. Can we change on some rotisserie this array of circumstances to, I don't know, better suit my need for personal safety?
And so for the audience out there, if you cannot identify with this, then you're not a real pilot, because we've all done it. I went back into live ATC net to try to find a couple of flights where I knew I'd done that, and they were no longer in there. But I remember when I was going through instrument and they were giving me the clearance for the approach, I ended my transmission with, I know I said a bunch of words that didn't mean anything, but I understand what you want me to do. I mean, and they laughed. They thought it was funny, but we've all been there. And that's kind of what we're going to ask the community. If you want to poke fun at yourself, we're not here to laugh at you. We've all done this, and we just thought it would be a fun segment.
If anything, also to make people feel better, right? To make people feel better, right? It's like this is.
Listen, if you put it out in the universe, you're going to feel better instantly. I absolutely believe that. So
yeah.
So Josh, I really do appreciate you allowing us to use your phrase and use you as our first example. That's very magnanimous of you, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say it's easy to stay humble, when you're a pilot.
Well, and so by the way, I need to make sure people understand too that Josh has a great YouTube channel with lots of videos, and you've got some rich archives of bloopers and all kinds of things. So if you want more, he's got more. What is how do people find your YouTube channel, Josh?
Yeah, sure. It's Josh McElhatton. My YouTube is the channel is at Josh MC. So JOSHMC.
At Josh MC. Right.
Thankfully for spelling, that's a lot easier. Yes.
Yeah.
So Brian and I both clicked on this comment at the same time from 50 by 60, which is my radio skills were superb until I'm on the radio. Yeah. CFIs love to say it's not a push to think button. It's like, yeah, that's great. But
here's one that's even more embarrassing. The question earlier from Jeremy, how do you pass the time? So I will sit and think about what I want to say to a controller just to kind of jazz it up a little bit, ask him how he's doing, whatever, just try to come up with something a little creative. and I jumble it every single time. I sound like a complete idiot when I try to do something out of the normal.
I find myself when I did this trip out west. So the frequencies here are very busy. You can't mess around. But when I was going out west, there was all this time where I kept just radio check, and they'd be like, "Yep, oh, loud and clear." I just hadn't heard anybody say anything for 20 or 30 minutes, and it would be almost unnerving. Or I feel like maybe my radio doesn't work, and this is how it's all going to begin. I'm going to end up in the desert somehow. But
we had that conversation in Discord today about what do I do? Do I switch frequencies when I don't hear back from them?
Yeah.
And
so
yeah, it can be quieter.
Well, so when I have those moments though, when I realize it's like once you do the radio check or just something to make sure they're still there, then there's this kind of awkward moment afterwards where it's kind of like, are you here? Yeah, I'm here. It's like there's no one else here. And I so badly just want to go, so what are you doing right now?
Exactly.
Like, what do you do when it's like this?
Yeah.
Maybe that's like an opposing bases question, but yeah. So yeah, I feel like I want to talk to them. I want to razz them. I want to say all kind of things, and I restrain myself. But yeah. So when you're out there though, looking for something else to do to keep yourself occupied. Maybe that's a new thing we can all start trying to do is create awkward conversations with controllers that don't want to be having them.
That's exactly. That's what I end up doing without trying to. So that's how it goes.
Yeah. We'll wrap this up with Jeremy's comment, which is it's one of those, no, you hang up moments with ATC. It's like, who's more bored right now? Yeah. So,
oh man,
that's awesome. Well, Josh, thanks again for coming on. It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You can stay on for our wrap up here. Yeah. Keep your beautiful face on here.
Is there a Discord afterwards chat thing?
Yeah, we're gonna have an afterward on the after party on Discord.
Okay,
so I've got to have my cigar, so yeah, I'll be joining on that. Yeah. But
in fact,
with that said, we'll bring this in for landing. Everybody, keep in mind we want to hear from you. We love getting the feedback. The email address is midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. Send your feedback, thoughts, poetry, whatever you feel like sending us. You can join us live on YouTube. The plan is every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. So we'd love for you to join us. So
8 p.m. Eastern.
I'm sorry?
Eastern.
Eastern. Thank you.
Yeah.
7 p.m. Radio Row.
Right.
We've got to get Radio Row in here still.
Music Row.
Yeah. Music Row. I disappointed Chris. I actually had that in my brain, but it was a bag of words on the intro, as everybody heard. So, that's going to happen. So, but for next week's episode, if you are a midlifer and you want to learn to fly, where do you start? What are the different ways to learn? What are the different things you need to know, or what do you need to investigate? What questions should you be asking? We've covered, Brian and Chris covered this a good while back, but we thought it'd be a good time to maybe revisit it and maybe take it from a fresh perspective. So,
yeah, we don't want to, there's a lot of people that are probably on the cusp of considering training or have just started, and we want to make sure that we're speaking to those folks as much as we are the people that are somehow, some way getting bored on a cross-country flight after all we went through to learn and to do all this stuff. No, but yeah, so I'm excited about that next week. And this is weekly now, so I'm excited about that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ted, any other thoughts you want to add?
No, Tuesday it is. It's going to be great.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for potting, and we will see you guys on the next Tuesday night.
All right. Thanks.
See you, everybody.
See you, everybody.